There comes a moment. A strange moment when everything feels quieter than usual. The noise fades, the voices grow distant, and even the light around you seems to dim. You feel it, not all at once, but gradually. Like being slowly pushed from a circle you didn't know was closing in. Like the world deciding, without a word, that you no longer belong. You're not invited. Not remembered. Not included. And at first, you think it's just a phase. That maybe it's all in your mind. You make excuses for their silence. You try to understand their distance. You forgive their coldness without ever being asked to. But deep down, a truth begins to rise. One that's darker than you wanted to admit. Someone, maybe more than one, has finally made a decision. And that decision was you. Not to protect you. Not to help you. But to erase you. Not in some grand, dramatic way. Not with rage or noise or even visible betrayal. No, this kind of erasing is quieter. More precise. More sinister. It happens in whispers behind closed doors. In silent glances exchanged when you walk into a room. In the way conversations pause when you arrive, and continue when you leave. It's in the messages that never get replied to. The invitations that stop coming. The loyalty that once stood behind you, now standing somewhere else entirely. And the worst part? They do it so smoothly, so silently, that it makes you question yourself. You start to wonder, what did I do wrong? Why doesn't anyone see me anymore? Did I become a burden, or was I always one? You replay moments, over and over. Looking for the crack, the turning point, the line you must have crossed that made them walk away. But this isn't about your mistakes. It never was. It's about your presence. Your light. Your strength. Your divine assignment that made people around you uncomfortable. You started to grow, and they didn't want you to. You began to rise, and it reminded them that they were standing still. They didn't erase you because you were weak. They erased you because you were becoming powerful in a way they couldn't control. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't understand, was that your life is not in their hands. It never was. There is a greater plan at work here. A higher hand guiding your steps, even in the shadows. And while people conspired to remove you, while they closed doors and shifted narratives, God was watching. Not passively. Not from a distance. But attentively, intimately. And as your name was dragged through decisions meant to bury you, He whispered that name into the ears of Archangel Michael. Heaven took note. And while they plotted your ending, God began preparing your next chapter. Not a repeat. Not a recovery. But a resurrection. You see, what man removes, God restores. What they discard, heaven reclaims. They thought you were out. But you were being called out, for something higher. Something deeper. Something sacred. They saw your absence as the end. But God saw it as the beginning of something they would never be ready for. He pulled you back so He could raise you up. Not in their system, but in His. Not in rooms filled with manipulation, but in spaces filled with purpose. Because here's the truth: you were never meant to belong to broken circles. You were never meant to remain in places that only welcomed the version of you that stayed small. And you were certainly never meant to be defined by people who were quietly praying for your failure. Their decision to remove you? It was actually God's intervention. And now, the silence they left you in is where heaven is beginning to speak. Not just to comfort you, but to prepare you. Because something is coming. A shift. A moment. A divine reversal that will leave even your enemies speechless. What they meant for harm will become the very tool God uses to elevate you. They tried to erase your name, but He carved it into eternity. They tried to dim your light, but the fire in you came from above, and it doesn't burn out. So breathe. Even if the air feels heavy. Even if it feels like you've been forgotten. You haven't. You're not done. You're not finished. You're not erased. You've just stepped out of their reach, and into God's protection. And now, as you sit in this moment, wondering why it had to happen this way, remember this: they didn't expect what happens next. But heaven already saw it coming. And if your heart knows this message was meant for you, pause. Let it sink in. And when you're ready, continue forward. Because the comeback has already begun. There are many ways to be wounded in this world. Some are loud, sharp words thrown like daggers, angry departures, visible betrayals. But others, they cut far deeper. They come with silence. With absence. With doors that once opened easily, now shut quietly and firmly. And perhaps what hurts the most is that no one announces it. No one stands in front of you and says, "You don't belong here anymore." No, they just stop opening the door. You're not told. You're not warned. You're simply left out. And it's in those quiet moments, those invisible exiles, that something inside you begins to unravel. At first, confusion floods your heart. What changed? Why are they pulling away? You scroll back through your own memories, searching for a moment you might have offended, a word you shouldn't have said, a decision that somehow made you unworthy. But what if I told you that the door closing had nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with your weight? Because when people can no longer handle the weight of who you're becoming, they try to distance themselves before your transformation becomes too real. Your growth intimidated them. Your healing made them uncomfortable. Your light made their shadows more obvious. So instead of celebrating you, they quietly shut the door. Not out of strength, but out of fear. And they did it in such a way that it almost made you think they were right. You blamed yourself. You questioned your voice. You silenced your spirit. But listen carefully now, because what I'm about to tell you is the truth you've needed to hear for far too long. That door didn't shut by accident. It was closed with intention. They thought removing you would remove your influence. They believed that if they distanced themselves long enough, you'd forget who you were becoming. That you'd go quiet. That you'd retreat. That you'd stay small. But what they failed to see was who was standing behind that door the moment they shut it. God. Not absent. Not passive. Present. Powerful. Watching. They believed their rejection was final. But heaven was never relying on their approval to fulfill your purpose. In fact, sometimes God allows certain doors to close, not to punish you, but to protect you. You thought it was a betrayal. But it was preservation. Because not every room you're left out of is a loss. Some rooms become prisons in disguise. And the door that shut in your face? It saved you from walking into something that would have buried your potential. They didn't realize that shutting you out gave God the room to bring you into His plan, His timing, His elevation. And as they celebrated your absence, thinking they had successfully erased your voice, God was assigning Archangel Michael to go before you, to tear down the next wall, to prepare the next place. Because here's what heaven knows: what man shuts down, God builds around. You were never locked out. You were being redirected. They thought they were writing your ending. But in truth, they were just turning the page. There is a place being built for you, a space with your name on it, a moment in time that will reveal why it all had to happen the way it did. So if you're standing there, in the echo of a closed door, in the ache of abandonment, in the weight of being erased, remember this. You haven't been erased. You've been remembered, by the only one whose memory matters. The door they closed will not be the final word. God is the author. And this chapter is far from over. He's about to walk you into rooms no man can block. He's about to speak your name in places that once tried to silence you. He's about to show them what happens when they try to erase someone that He appointed. And you, yes, you are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are not lost. You are being hidden, for a reveal they won't be ready for. And if this speaks to the storm inside your soul, if you feel heaven tugging at your heart through these words, then let your spirit respond. Like this video. Type Amen in the comments or any word of faith you feel. And make sure you subscribe, not for content, but because every word from here is a lifeline meant for moments like this. Because what's ahead isn't just recovery. It's a rise. They left. Some drifted like smoke in the air, barely noticeable at first. Their presence grew faint, their words more measured, their warmth colder than before. They didn't announce it. They didn't give you a warning. They just began fading from your life as if you were a book they no longer wanted to read. And others? They left loudly. They walked away with final words that bruised you deeper than they realized. Their silence afterward spoke volumes, a silence heavier than any scream. One moment, they were beside you. The next, you were alone. And you sat there, in that ache, in that hollow quiet, asking questions that no one else could answer. What did I do to deserve this? Was I too much? Why do people leave when I need them most? You didn't want to admit it, but a part of you blamed yourself. You replayed old conversations in your head. You searched for the wrong thing you might have said, the wrong step you might have taken. But let me speak something to the softest part of you, the part that still holds guilt over being left behind. It was never about you being unworthy. It was never about you failing. It was about your spirit growing too large for their comfort. Your presence carried weight. Not everyone could handle it. And the truth is, some people didn't leave because they stopped loving you. They left because they couldn't stand to watch you rise. You outgrew the limits they were comfortable with. You outshined the boundaries they thought would contain you. You carried something sacred, something heaven-breathed, and when people don't understand the light inside you, they either try to control it, or they walk away from it. But what they didn't understand was that their leaving was never a loss for you. It was a reveal. It was heaven gently peeling back the curtain to show you who was only in your story for the broken parts. Who only stayed when you were down. Who only clapped when you weren't threatening to succeed. And as painful as it was, God allowed it. Not to hurt you, but to free you. You see, if you had stayed attached to them, if you had continued depending on their presence to feel seen, then your rise would have always been limited by their permission. But God never called you to live under human validation. He called you to walk under divine authority. So, yes. They walked. They erased their name from your future. They pretended they never needed you. But in doing so, they made one grave mistake: they assumed that without them, you would fall. They believed that their absence would stop your growth. They thought their silence would break you. But you didn't break. You bent. You cried. You questioned. But you didn't shatter. Because just as they turned away, God turned toward you. Just as their voices went quiet, heaven spoke louder. And in the secret place, where pain met purpose, God began to build something that they couldn't see. He didn't build it in front of them. He didn't build it for show. He built it in silence, like a seed buried deep, where no one sees it, but heaven watches it grow. He assigned Archangel Michael to protect your progress, to surround your space, to guard what was beginning to rise in the dark. And now, those who walked away, those who removed themselves from your journey, those who spoke your name with sarcasm and dismissed your strength, they will witness something they never saw coming. They will watch as the one they forgot becomes the one heaven favors. Not in revenge. Not in pride. But in divine appointment. You were never meant to chase those who left. You were never meant to beg for space in places that could not carry your calling. You were meant to rise, and sometimes, that rising required a separation first. So don't mourn what walked away. Thank God for what was removed. Because your journey from this point forward is not about trying to be seen by people who once overlooked you, it's about walking boldly into the rooms that were always yours, even before you arrived. And if this spoke to you, if your heart felt seen in these words, then don't just pass by. Like this video, type Amen or I receive this in the comments, and subscribe for more words that remind your spirit who you are. Because you weren't erased. You were released. And now, the path ahead is yours to walk, with God beside you, and heaven cheering for every step you take. The silence was the hardest part, wasn't it? Not the betrayal. Not even the lies. But the silence that followed it all, the stillness that came after the storm, where nothing made sense and no one explained anything. It was like waking up one day and realizing the world had moved on, without you. You looked around, searching for familiar faces, familiar voices, people who once cheered you on, people who once called you family, and they were nowhere to be found. The laughter faded. The warmth disappeared. And what remained was a crushing, heavy, unforgiving silence. You waited for someone to reach out. For someone to say, "I see you. I miss you. You still matter." But the silence stayed. And it spoke louder than words ever could. It told you, you've been forgotten. You're not important anymore. You were never really one of us. And those lies began to settle in your heart like dust on an abandoned shelf. Each day, they grew heavier. Each night, they echoed louder. Until you began to believe them. You convinced yourself that you must have done something wrong. That maybe this silence was punishment. That maybe God, too, had stepped away. But listen to me, lean in, because you need to hear this with the full weight of your spirit. The silence was not your ending. It was the signal. It wasn't abandonment. It was transition. It wasn't rejection. It was protection. God wasn't punishing you. He was setting the stage. You were looking for validation from people who were never designed to carry your calling. You were trying to build a future on foundations that were already cracking. You were trusting voices that were only loyal to your pain, not to your purpose. So, He allowed the silence. He allowed the distance. He allowed the loneliness. Because in that quiet, in that deep, uncomfortable quiet, He began to speak. He whispered in ways the noise never allowed. He reminded you of who you are when no one is clapping, when no one is posting about you, when no one is watching. Because if your identity is only strong when others are cheering, then it will always crumble when they're silent. So God let the silence fall like night over your life, not to abandon you, but to bring something to life inside you. And deep within that silence, something stirred. Not loud. Not quick. But steady. A new kind of strength. One that didn't depend on crowds. One that wasn't built on applause. One that came from knowing, deep in your bones, that you were chosen, not by people, but by God Himself. And while you were hidden, while you were quiet, while they thought you were out, heaven was watching over you. Archangel Michael, warrior of divine justice, was dispatched to shield what God was building in the silence. To block every unseen attack. To protect you when no one else knew you were vulnerable. Because what comes out of the silence is something no man can stop. They thought silence meant you were finished. But God was preparing your voice, a voice that doesn't echo through rooms anymore, but shakes atmospheres. A voice that carries the weight of someone who's been through fire, and came out refined, not destroyed. And now that you've walked through the quiet, now that you've stood in the shadows and kept breathing, God says, you are ready. Ready to speak with authority. Ready to walk without fear. Ready to be seen, not for who they imagined you to be, but for who I created you to be. So, no, the silence didn't break you. It built you. And if these words are igniting something in your chest, if your soul recognizes the truth beneath them, then let heaven hear your agreement, type "I'm still standing" or "Amen" in the comments. Like this video if you know God has been working behind the scenes. And subscribe to stay connected to every word meant to lift you up out of hiding. Because the silence was never your sentence, it was your signal. That you are being called into something bigger than they ever imagined. They thought they had you figured out. They believed your story had already reached its final page. They watched you go silent, watched you disappear from the places you once lit up, and they mistook your stillness for surrender. They thought the quiet meant you had nothing left. So, they wrote you off. With confident pens, they signed your name off the list of the worthy. They scratched you out of their future plans. They erased you, not just from their lives, but from their expectations of anything meaningful or mighty. And they did it with ease. Because in their minds, you were done. Finished. Forgotten. They didn't see your tears. They didn't see the nights you stayed up wondering where you went wrong. They didn't see the way you held your breath in crowded rooms, hoping no one noticed your shaking spirit. All they saw was absence. And they mistook absence for defeat. But oh, how wrong they were. Because what they never understood is that God doesn't operate on human timelines. He isn't pressured by public opinion. He doesn't panic when others walk away. And he certainly doesn't call something finished just because people gave up on it. See, while they were writing you off, heaven was writing you in. Not into their chapters, but into his plan. Because what they saw as the end was actually the beginning of something they were never supposed to be part of. God removed them not to hurt you, but to clear the path for what's next. He saw their true motives. He heard the conversations behind closed doors. He knew who could walk with you and who couldn't survive the glory coming upon your life. So yes, they stepped back. They erased their loyalty. They wrote you off. But they forgot. God holds the pen. And when God writes your name in destiny, no hand on earth can scribble it out. You were chosen before you were approved. Anointed before you were accepted. And set apart before anyone ever believed in you. That's why the pain hit so deep. That's why the loss felt so final. Because your spirit was wrestling not just with human abandonment, but with divine redirection. It wasn't just people walking away. It was God pulling you out of places where you were never meant to stay. Because he knew something they didn't, you were about to be unveiled. Not just seen, but revealed. Not just restored, but reintroduced. Not to prove anything to them, but to fulfill everything he placed inside you. And the irony is, they'll be there. Watching. Silently. Confused. Wondering how the one they wrote off suddenly rose from nothing. How the voice they silenced now echoes louder than ever. How the presence they erased now carries a power they can't ignore. But you? You won't be focused on proving them wrong. You'll be too busy walking in what they never believed you'd reach. Because when God says it's time, not even hell can hold you back. And right now, he's stirring. He's moving. The tables are turning. The script is flipping. And what was meant to bury you has become the very soil of your breakthrough. So let them wonder. Let them talk. Let them watch. Because what happens next is between you and God, and it's going to be undeniable. If this word found you, if you felt the fire rise inside your chest while hearing these truths, then let your heart respond, like this video. Comment, "Heaven still has my name," or "Amen." And subscribe, because what's coming will need preparation, and every word ahead is meant to armor you for what God is about to release. They wrote you off. But God, He was just getting started. They thought it was over. They gathered in their quiet places, in whispered conversations, unseen rooms, and silent agreements. They made peace with the idea that you were done, forgotten, finished. To them, it was simple: you'd vanished. You'd disappeared from the spotlight. And whatever promise you once carried, it must have faded away with the noise of your silence. So they buried it. Buried your name in the cold soil of assumption. Buried your worth beneath the weight of their opinions. Buried your destiny like something that died too soon. And when they walked away from that shallow grave, they felt nothing. No remorse. No reverence. Just relief, that you, the one who carried fire in your voice and truth in your bones, was no longer a threat. But what they didn't realize is this: you weren't buried to be forgotten. You were planted to be revealed. Because God never wastes a burial. When He allows you to go into the ground, when He lets you be covered in silence, in betrayal, in shame, in disappointment, it is never to end you. It's to prepare you. It's to surround you in stillness, so your roots can grow deep. It's to hide you for a season, so your strength won't be seen too early by those who'd misuse it. It's to press you into the soil of surrender so that when you rise, and you will rise, you won't be the same. You won't rise with the voice of vengeance. You'll rise with the roar of purpose. Because while they thought the dirt would silence you, they forgot what heaven does with seeds. It speaks to them. It nourishes them. It protects them until the right time. And when that time comes, when the season shifts, and the rain finally reaches the hidden places, the seed doesn't whisper. It bursts. It erupts through the soil that tried to hold it down. It breaks through every layer of doubt, every lie, every name it was called. It rises with no permission, because it doesn't need any. And that's what's happening now. The ground is shaking. Not in fear, but in release. What God planted in you is beginning to press upward. You've sat long enough in the dark. You've been still long enough in the silence. You've held back your voice, your fire, your call, but not anymore. The grave they mistook for your ending is about to become the very stage of your reintroduction. And the ones who watched you disappear? They'll have no choice but to watch you bloom. To watch you thrive. To watch you rise into the very thing they never believed was possible. But this time, you won't rise for their approval. You won't rise to prove them wrong. You'll rise because God called you to, because Archangel Michael guarded your growth in the unseen, because heaven wrote your name in a future too big to be buried by man. So if your life has felt like a season of hiding, if you've felt surrounded, pressed down, forgotten, hear this with every fiber of your being: you are not buried. You are not done. You are not erased. You are the seed. And it's time to break the surface. If these words pierced through your silence, if they stirred something buried inside your spirit, then don't leave this moment quietly. Like this video. Type "I'm still growing" or "Amen" in the comments. And subscribe, because what comes next will need your spirit ready, and these words are the water that will keep you rooted. They buried what they thought was your end. But heaven knew all along. It was your beginning. They didn't expect to hear your name again. Not in rooms of importance. Not in conversations of influence. Not in moments that mattered. In their minds, your name had been erased, crossed out, silenced, buried deep in the chapters they had already closed. They moved on. They rewrote the story without you. They spoke about you in the past tense, as if the version of you they discarded was the final one the world would ever see. But they forgot something only heaven remembered. You don't belong to their version of the story. You belong to God's. And in His story, no one gets to write the ending but Him. You see, while they were busy pretending you never existed, God was orchestrating your return, not to where you came from, but to where you were always meant to be. This time, your name isn't being whispered in jealousy. It's being spoken in awe. This time, your presence isn't tolerated. It's honored. Because what was birthed in the silence, what was formed in the wilderness, what was guarded by Archangel Michael in the dark, has now emerged into the light. And now they see you. Not the version they tried to manipulate. Not the broken one they thought they left behind. No, now they see the one that rose. The one with fire in their eyes. The one who walks with a confidence born in suffering. The one who no longer asks for permission, because they were called by God, not chosen by man. They don't know what to say now. The people who erased you, the ones who agreed to your removal, are now watching your name return to spaces they tried to keep you out of. And not only that, they're realizing something they never saw coming: you didn't come back the same. You came back greater. You came back with a clarity they can't confuse. You came back with a strength they can't manipulate. You came back with the backing of heaven, and there is no force on this earth that can challenge that. But here's the most beautiful part: you're not even trying to prove anything to them anymore. You've healed beyond needing their acceptance. You've matured past wanting their approval. Because you've seen what it's like to be kept in the palm of God, and no applause compares to that peace. So now, you walk different. You speak with more authority. You choose your battles wisely. You guard your heart with wisdom. And you honor your assignment with sacred fire. You don't need to announce your return. Your fruit will speak louder than their doubt ever did. Because this isn't revenge. This is restoration. This is not about showing them who you are, it's about becoming who you were always meant to be. The erasing didn't work. The silence didn't stop you. The betrayal didn't destroy you. And now, the prophecy that was whispered over your life long ago, the one they never believed, is beginning to unfold right in front of them. And just like that, the one they thought was out, is standing in the center of God's divine spotlight. But this time, you're not standing alone. You are walking with heaven's fire behind you, with God's hand on your shoulder, and Archangel Michael's sword clearing every obstacle ahead of you. So listen carefully now. The erasing didn't erase you. It revealed you. It showed the world that your story doesn't end when people stop clapping. It doesn't end when the circle turns cold. It doesn't end when the door is closed in your face. Your story ends when God says it's finished, and He's not done yet. In fact, He's just now opening the curtain. The stage is ready. The lights are rising. And what happens next? It won't just be a comeback. It will be a divine unveiling. So walk forward, not to prove anything, but to fulfill everything. And if this final word has spoken directly to your soul, if it feels like it found the version of you that nearly gave up, don't scroll away quietly. Like this video. Type, "I was never erased," or "Amen" in the comments. And subscribe, not just for the words, but for the continual reminders that heaven always finishes what it starts. Because this isn't just the end of the story they wrote. It's the beginning of the one God never let them touch.